The movie starts in South Korea, in a quiet city called Cheonan. It's a peaceful place where crimes rarely ever happen. But about a year ago, things started to change. Murder cases began to rise across the city. What's strange is that the police still haven't been able to find the killer. One night, a black car was driving down the street when suddenly a white car appeared behind it and crashed into it. The driver of the black car got out to record the damage for insurance purposes. While he was filming, the driver of the white car approached him to apologize. But out of nowhere, the man pulled out a knife and started stabbing him repeatedly and violently until the victim fell dead. Then the killer jumped into his car and sped away, leaving no trace behind. The next day, two detectives were stuck in traffic on their way to the crime scene. One of them, named Tae, suddenly decided to stop by a nearby gambling den to check it out. When the guards tried to stop him, he lost his temper, fought them off, and went straight inside. There, he arrested a man involved in money laundering. Meanwhile, the local mafia boss, Dong, was in his club when his assistant came in, telling him that a police officer had raided one of their gambling dens and arrested one of their men. Dong got furious and said he'd handle it himself. He stormed out with a group of bodyguards and angrily called the police chief. He reminded him that he pays him a lot of money to keep his men safe and out of trouble. Yet Officer Tae still dared to mess with his business. Later, Tae arrived at the murder scene and examined the area carefully. He noticed the dent on the car and called over the forensic doctor, Jin. She looked at the damage and guessed that the killer might have acted out of anger after a small car accident. Back at the police station, Tae attended a meeting with the other officers to discuss the murder case. The police chief believed it was a robbery gone wrong. The victim must have resisted, and the killer stabbed him. But Tae disagreed. He was convinced that this killer was the same person responsible for the last 3 murders. He explained that all the victims were stabbed in exactly the same way, with wounds that matched perfectly, meaning the same knife was used in all 3 cases. The chief, however, mocked him, saying, "We live in Korea, Tae. Nobody uses guns here. Of course, people kill with knives. If we linked every stabbing to one person, half the criminals would be the same guy." He also warned Tae not to get involved with Dong's men, saying those cases were outside his jurisdiction. Instead, he told him to just focus on solving the murder as fast as possible. Later that same day, Dong meets with another mafia boss named Sang. There's tension between them because of how they divide their shares and illegal businesses in the market. Sang tells Dong that he won't accept getting a smaller cut than him ever again. That makes Dong furious. He tells Sang he should be thankful he's even allowed to do business in the market at all. Sang's assistant gets angry and yells back, which only makes things worse. Dong loses his temper, punches him hard, and breaks his teeth. After that, Dong leaves the place, but he's clearly still upset. So he tells his guards to stay behind and decides to drive around the city alone to cool off. While he's driving, another car suddenly hits him. The driver steps out, and it turns out to be the same killer who's been stabbing people all over the city. Dong gets out to check the damage, and realizes the crash was minor, so he's about to leave. But, as usual, the killer attacks from behind and stabs him in the back with a knife. However, Dong is strong. He fights back, manages to push the killer off, grabs the knife, and stabs him in the chest instead. For a brief moment, Dong gets a clear look at the killer's face before the man jumps into his car and drives straight into Dong, hitting him before escaping. Dong is left badly injured and rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Meanwhile, Dong's men hear the news. They're furious and immediately assume Sang's gang is behind the attack because of their earlier argument. They storm Sang's place and beat up everyone they find there. At the same time, the killer hides in the woods, treating the stab wound in his chest. He stumbles upon a dog farm nearby, but when one of the dogs starts barking at him, he kills it without hesitation. Back in the hospital, Dong wakes up and talks to his assistant. He tells him that the attacker wasn't from Sang's gang. The way he fought was completely different. He also says he didn't feel like the killer had any reason or motive to attack him. Before resting, Dong writes down details about the car he saw and orders his assistant to find it. At that time, Detective Tae arrives at the hospital to check on Dong. He asks him to explain what happened and promises he'll catch the killer. But Dong lies and says he just slipped while walking and got injured, then tells Tae to leave because he needs to rest. Tae leaves, but before heading out, he stops by the parking garage to inspect Dong's car. He notices a dent on the back, exactly like in the other murder cases. That's when Tae realizes his suspicion was right. The same killer who attacked the victims also attacked Dong. Tae goes back to the police station. While at the hospital, Sang visits Dong to check on him. Even though Dong's men had attacked his crew earlier, Sang apologizes and promises to make up for all the damage. Later, a police sketch artist arrives and Dong describes the killer's face in detail. The sketch turns out to be almost identical to the real killer, meaning it's only a matter of time before Dong can find him and get his revenge. Back at the station, Tae talks to his boss and tells him that Dong was attacked by the same killer a few days ago. He asks to take over the case, saying that if he solves it, they'll finally catch the murderer behind all the unsolved killings. He also points out that, for the first time, someone actually survived the killer's attack, but the police chief refuses and warns Tae one last time to stay away from Dong. Tae refuses to back down. He argues that Dong saw the killer's face and has enough men to find and kill him. If that happens, there'll be no evidence left, and the case will remain unsolved forever. The chief gets furious and kicks Tae out of his office. Later that same day, the killer stops at a roadside rest area, murders a driver, and steals his car. While driving, he discovers that the driver's assistant is still in the back seat. They get into a brutal fight, and the killer stabs him to death. But during the struggle, his knife falls out of the car onto the road. Meanwhile, Tae decides to keep investigating the case despite his boss's warning. He goes to Dong's house and threatens to arrest him for running illegal gambling operations unless he tells him what he knows about the attacker. Dong finally admits that the man who attacked him is mentally unstable, a psychopath who has killed many people at random and won't stop unless someone stops him first. Tae realizes they're dealing with a professional killer, but Dong tells him he doesn't need his help and promises he'll find and kill the murderer himself. Soon after, Dong sends his men all over the city to search for the killer. He meets with his right-hand man, Soo, who tells him they found the killer's car near a gas station. They also discovered that, on that same day, the killer murdered a driver and stole his vehicle. While searching the area, they even found the knife he used. Dong then decides to contact Detective Tae for help and calls him, asking to meet. Tae agrees and goes to see him. At their meeting, Dong tells Tae that the killer from the gas station incident is the same man who attacked him. He says they found the killer's car and hands Tae the keys so the police can lift fingerprints from it. Dong continues, saying they should work together to catch this man once and for all. But Tae refuses, saying that even if they find him, he won't let Dong kill him. Dong then proposes a deal. Whoever finds the killer first gets to handle him their own way. Since Tae is competitive by nature, he accepts the challenge. While they're talking, Dong reveals that he's been secretly recording their entire conversation, just in case Tae decides to betray him and arrest him later. Tae gets furious, grabs the recorder, smashes it, and tells Dong, "If you think you're clever, I'm smarter." But Dong calmly plays a video from the security cameras and reveals that he's recorded everything, both audio and video. Tae realizes he's trapped and reluctantly agrees to the plan. Later, Tae meets with two of his fellow officers and tells them everything, hoping they'll help, but they refuse. They don't trust the mafia boss Dong. Tae insists that they need Dong's power, resources, and money to catch the killer. He assigns them to gather evidence from the gas station and inspect the killer's car for any clues about his identity. Meanwhile, Dong uses this cooperation as a distraction. With the police busy investigating, he can now make his own move. He orders his right-hand man to take the killer's knife and use it to murder Sang, so it'll look like the work of the same psychopath. The plan works. Dong's man sneaks into Sang's house and kills him using the killer's knife. The next morning, Tae meets the forensic doctor, Jin, and hands her a file with samples they found inside the killer's car. He asks her to run a DNA test and identify the owner. Later, Jin goes to the new crime scene where Sang was murdered. She's shocked to find that the knife was left inside the victim's body. Back at the lab, she analyzes the blood on the blade and calls Tae with the results. The DNA matches all the victims from the recent murder cases. That means all the killings are connected and were done by the same person. Tae is furious. He immediately rushes to Dong's house, punches him, and accuses him of killing Sang. Dong admits it, saying yes, he killed him. But he also reminds Tae that nothing's changed. Their deal still stands, and they both need to catch the real killer. Tae, frustrated but helpless, leaves because their agreement was recorded, meaning he has no choice but to stick to it. Dong goes to Sang's funeral after killing him. Among the crowd, the killer is also there, silently watching everything. He walks up to Sang's assistant and hands him a note. On it, it says, "Dong used my knife to kill Sang." That same night, the killer strikes again, murdering another random victim, the same brutal way he always does. Later, Tae meets up with Dong, and they decide to search the killer's car themselves. As they inspect it, they find a small bloodstain, possibly the killer's. But before they can do anything, Sang's gang suddenly ambushes them for revenge. A violent fight breaks out. Dong and Tae take them down one by one. Tae fights fiercely, protecting Dong. After the chaos, one of Sang's men attacks Tae with a knife, trying to stab him. Tae defends himself, but in the struggle, he accidentally kills the man. He's shocked and frozen, unable to believe what he's done. Dong tells him to leave it to him. He'll handle the body. He wraps it in plastic and buries it himself. Later, at the police station, Tae falls asleep from exhaustion. His chief storms in, furious, and assigns him a new case, a kidnapping. Tae snaps, yelling that they still haven't caught the killer, who keeps murdering people every day. He reminds his boss that he told him from the start all the murders were connected, but no one listened. The chief doesn't care. He orders Tae to handle the kidnapping case immediately. Tae visits the kidnapped man's wife, who tells him the kidnapper demanded ransom. They make her call him to arrange a meeting, while the police secretly watch from a distance. They track her to a cafe where she's supposed to meet him. During the surveillance, Tae notices a strange man standing on the rooftop nearby. When the man realizes he's been spotted, he runs. The police chase after him through the streets, but he manages to escape. Back at the cafe, Tae questions the owner about what the suspect ordered. He learns that the man only asked for one cold drink. Tae immediately tells his team to dig through the trash for the empty bottle, hoping to find fingerprints. After hours of searching, they finally find it. Jin, the forensic doctor, analyzes the bottle and successfully identifies the killer's DNA, pulling up his full record. Tae then heads straight to the address listed in the file. The landlord tells him that the man has been missing for 3 months. She says he was quiet, polite, and never caused any trouble. When Tae searches the apartment, he finds all the tools and materials the killer used for his murders, and a clear photo of the killer himself. Tae calls Dong and tells him everything. He also sends him a photo of the killer. Later that same day, everyone gathers together to plan how they'll capture him. Tae learns that the killer's name is Kyung, a 35-year-old man. They distribute his photo to all of Dong's men, who spread out across the city searching for him. But there's no sign of him anywhere. After a long search, Dong decides they should take a short break and continue later. He arranges to meet Tai at a cafe that night, along with the rest of the gang. While waiting outside in the heavy rain, a little girl passes by without an umbrella. Dong gives her his own umbrella and stays under the rain himself. When Tai arrives, he's surprised by what he just saw. He never imagined a ruthless gang leader like Dong could show such kindness. They head into the cafe together, talking and relaxing with the others. But suddenly, a breaking news report appears on the TV. A little girl has been found murdered in a brutal way. Dong and Tai are shocked when they realize it's the same girl Dong gave his umbrella to earlier. Furious, Dong orders all his men to search the area near the road where the girl was killed. Soon, they discover that the killer is hiding in a nearby hotel. The whole group rushes to the hotel and set up an ambush. When the killer returns and notices them, he tries to escape, but they chase after him through the streets. In the end, Dong catches him and beats him mercilessly until he loses consciousness. Then Dong calls Tai to remind him of their deal. Since he's the one who caught the killer first, he has the right to deal with him his own way. Dong takes Kyung back to his hideout and starts torturing him, but the killer just laughs the whole time, showing no pain at all. Dong realizes that Kyung actually enjoys killing, just like he does. He sees that deep down, they are both the same kind of monster. Meanwhile, Tai drives as fast as he can to reach Dong before he kills the suspect. Dong finally decides that torture is useless and prepares to kill Kyung, but right at that moment, Tai crashes his car through the hideout, knocking Dong unconscious. He arrests the killer and takes him to the police station to face trial. Afterward, the police arrest all of Dong's men and shut down his entire criminal network. But Dong manages to escape and goes into hiding, wanted for many crimes. Later, Kyung goes to court. However, there isn't enough evidence to prove he's the murderer, and he begins to smile, confident he'll be released. But suddenly, a surprise witness enters the courtroom. It's Dong himself. He tells the judge that he came to testify against Kyung, since he's the only survivor who ever faced him and lived. The killer's lawyer argues that Dong has no real evidence to prove Kyung is guilty. Dong then takes off his shirt in front of the court and shows the judge exactly how the killer attacked him, the way he was stabbed and where the wounds were. He explains that while defending himself, he stabbed the killer once in the chest. The judge orders the guards to check the killer's body, and they find the scar exactly where Dong said it would be. Realizing Dong was telling the truth, the judge finally declares Kyung guilty and sentences him to our death. At the same time, the judge also orders Dong's arrest for all the crimes he committed in the past. That's when we learn that everything had actually been part of Tai's plan. After handing the killer over to the police, Tae discovered there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. Kyung would have walked free. So, Tae went to see Dong in his hiding place and convinced him to turn himself in and testify in court against the killer. Surprisingly, Dong agreed, but only on one condition, that he and Kyung be imprisoned in the same cell. And that's exactly what happens. Dong and Kyung end up in the same prison, and Dong finally gets his chance to take revenge on the man who nearly killed him. And that's how the story ends. Stay tuned for more movie summaries. Don't forget to hit the like button and help us reach 5,000 likes on this video. And if you made it all the way to the end, drop a heart emoji in the comments so I know you enjoyed it.